Assalamu alaikum. Let's cook. Okay, people, we're going to go over the Washington, D.C. race war or race riot of 1919. Yes, Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. Now, this one right here, this riot or this race war is one that they don't like the youth to learn about because there were more white casualties than black. Black people won this riot or this war. Now, this started exactly on July 19th of 1919. Now, there were many race wars throughout the country at this time. It was at a time known as Red Summer. Now, the reason why this Red Summer happened because throughout the country, there were white men who came home from the war. And when these white men came home, they didn't get the handouts that they wanted. They didn't get the boots with the bootstraps. And they thought they were entitled to certain things since they fought for the country. They were struggling, many were miserable, drowning themselves in alcohol, but they seen black people who they felt were beneath them as humans, thriving, doing well, and making the best out of what they had. So these white guys in various cities nationwide would respond with the only way that they know how, which is in violence. And this is what caused what we know as Red Summer. Now in Washington, D.C. in 1919, the same thing was going on. There was that same energy there as well. At this time, the president is this guy by the name of Woodrow Wilson. Now, this dude, Woodrow Wilson, was a true cracker president. You could just imagine if you went to any KKK lodge and got the Grand Wizard and made him the president, that was Woodrow Wilson. Terrible man. He hated black people. Now, we have to get into what's going on in the black community and in the white community at this time in Washington, D.C. in 1919. In Washington, D.C. in 1919, there were 110,000 black Americans or African Americans in Washington, D.C., okay? That's more than any other city in America at this time, okay? That's a quarter of the population in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was black America's leading cultural and financial center with way more well-off African Americans than any other place. So in Washington, D.C., black people owned businesses. They were making their own way, using what they had, making something out of that. They were thriving, making progress. It was a thriving black community in Washington, D.C. at this time, okay? More than any other place in America. Now, the white community in Washington, D.C. in 1919. You know, white people were white people. Of course, they always had white privilege and white advantage. They were doing their thing, living their lives. They owned things. They had a quality of life. But they were also typical white American racists. But at this time, many of the white men just returned home from the war. And these men who returned home, they had a sense of entitlement. They were looking for work. And so these white men were allowed to go around and look for work with their military uniforms on. So when they looked for work, these prospective employers could identify them and know that, okay, this is a veteran. It was kind of like veterans' preference at that time. A lot of these guys who couldn't get work, they also seen black people who they felt were less human than them having success. So they were automatically jealous because of that. You know, it made them even more depressed. Depression leads to alcoholism. A lot of these guys were already alcoholics coming home from the war. So a lot of them were looking to, you know, drink their pain away. You know, and at this time, prohibition was in full effect in Washington, D.C. Buying liquor on the streets in Washington, D.C. was illegal. Actually, prohibition on alcohol came in D.C. before the rest of the country. D.C. was first. I don't know why. Maybe it had something to do with the government being there, okay? So white soldiers who were looking for a drink, they oftentimes had to go into the black neighborhoods. Don't get me wrong. White people were selling illegal alcohol as well. But black entrepreneurs controlled the illicit liquor trade, okay? Now, white people definitely were involved in illegal liquor at the time as well. Heavy. And they had it easier because, of course, you know, the police would give them a break. I mean, they white, same as drugs or anything else at any time, people. But black people were also deep in the illicit liquor trade, okay? So, you know, these dudes were also mad about that. You know, these black people were selling liquor, making a lot of money. Now, the white women in the white community, they were doing what they do, lying, you know, making up stories about black men attacking them and things like that because they knew they would get a response. Many of these white women, of course, they liked the black men, but leading up to the date of the D.C. riots, white women were telling numerous lies on black men attacking them, whether it be they were forced to say it or they did it on their own. That's what was going down. Here's another important part to this story. In Washington, D.C. at this time, there were 4 major media outlets that were owned by whitey. These were the Washington Post, the Washington Times, the Washington Herald, and the Evening Star. Then we had our own media outlet called the Washington Bee, black owned, black operated. Big shout out to a brother by the name of Calvin Chase, okay, who was the editor and the publisher of the Washington Bee. Now, the white media outlets at this time were making all kinds of sensational headlines because they were all in the battle to make money. You know, clickbait, that's what we call it. The original clickbait, everybody does it. But at this time, these white outlets were doing it in a very dangerous way. They knew that there was a great amount of miserable, jealous white men who came home from the war, and these outlets would take advantage of that by making these sensational headlines that would trigger these white folks. And of course, all racially driven, you know, making them more jealous, more miserable, making them realize who they really were. And we know, we can even see now, miserable white people are driven by these stories. This is what they actually want to see and hear. Even if a story is fake, they'll run with it if it can trigger the Mayo monster spirit in them, okay? Now, these white media outlets will make these fake stories about black men attacking black women. We know that they're fake, but they also knew that white women like black men, and this would trigger these black white male losers in his community as well. They knew that that was something that they could do to trigger these white guys because they knew deep inside that most of the white women, they like black men anyway. Now, these news articles had gotten so bad that they were writing that on July 9th, the NAACP sent a letter to all 4 newspapers pleading for them to please tone down the rhetoric and warning them that they're sowing the seeds of a race riot by their inflammatory headline. They knew that things could get out of hand. You know, already that summer there were race riots in Charleston, South Carolina, Longview, Texas, New London, Connecticut, Chicago, Omaha, Elaine, Arkansas. In addition, by mid-September, white mobs had lynched at least 43 black people, and 7 of these black people were black veterans that were lynched in their army uniforms. So due to these articles that were being wrote, people knew that it was only a matter of time before something popped off in Washington, D.C. Now, on July 5th, newspapers reported the serial attacker struck again, another white woman by the name of Mary Saunders. Mary Saunders said that she was assaulted by a black man just over the district line in Maryland near the Chevy Chase Circle. The district police chief told newspapers that he was sure these crimes were all being committed by the same perpetrator of these white women. So he assigned 40 officers to investigate. Then he assigned 60 more. Then he authorized hundreds of volunteers from a wartime amateur patrol called Home Defense League to join in this manhunt. So over the next week, hundreds of black men were being rounded up, taken in by police, and these volunteers, these fake amateur war patrol guys, and anybody, they all were taken in as possible suspects. Many of these black men were grabbed from their homes without warrants. And then on July 18th, there was another incident, okay? There's a 19-year-old white girl by the name of Elsie Stepnick. Now this Elsie, she was walking to her home on 9th Street in Southwest from her job with the Bureau of Engraving. She said that 2 black men collided with her and tried to steal her umbrella. Now the Evening Star, which is one of the white people's outlet, reported her description of black men. She said one was a short, dark man, and there was a taller man with a bumpy face. This Elsie Stepnick, she claimed that she shook them off until a carload of white men came to help her. Okay, now there was no other word or no evidence or reports that suggests that anything else happened. Now, this white girl, Elsie Stepnick, she was married to a Naval Aviation Corps employee, and the story made the rounds amongst the white soldiers, all the white sailors. So these guys are all getting up, they getting amped up, forming Pale Voltron, a bunch of Mayo monsters ready to go out and do something. And this was over the holiday weekend, okay? People, I must add that this white chick, Elsie Stepnick, later admitted that she was lying, okay? She admitted that she was lying. Now, the police did arrest a black man by the name of Charles Rawls for this, okay? For this attack on Elsie Stepnick, although she was lying. The newspapers continued to make these headlines in their papers. They said that there were African American gangs of rapists who were terrorizing the city for months. All lies. They would put things in the paper like Negroes attack white girl, Negro thugs attack. But of course, the white men responded because that's what they want to do anyway. They don't care whether the stories make sense or not. So these white men feel like they have to do something, More than 100 servicemen, after hours of heavy drinking, they gathered outside all these taverns and brothels and pool halls in these neighborhoods. They were particularly in a neighborhood known as Murder Bay, okay? This area called Murder Bay is home of the federal buildings on Pennsylvania Avenue, okay? You know where that's at, people, if you from Washington, D.C. or whatever. And these white men, over 100 of them, they got pipes, they got clubs, sticks, pistols, okay? A mob of veterans. They all marched south across the National Mall to a poor black neighborhood then known as Bloodfield. There was a 55-year-old black man by the name of George Montgomery. He was out shopping, buying produce. They seen him and they beat down on him first. They beat this black man down just because he was black, okay? Then they spotted somebody by the name of Charles Rouse and his wife, and they started assaulting them until they broke free and ran home, okay? These white guys are out here wilding. So what's going on now is there are mobs of white men. They're all coming in, they're feeling themselves. Oh, we got more numbers, more soldiers, okay? They're just going around beating every black person down that they seen. And of course, Pell Voltron has a effect. You got more people coming in, more white people like, okay, but we want to get down with this. The problem is they actually thought that they would be able to go around and beat the brakes off of black people with no recourse. Not at all. The black community was full of war veterans as well, and they got themselves together. They're like, no, it's not going down like this. People, remember, the Washington Bee. This is the black newspaper outlet owned and ran by black people. So this black newspaper outlet was running stories telling black people to arm themselves, okay? This is what a black outlet does when it's owned by black people. They're going to be for the people, you know what I mean? And this Washington Bee, that's what it was. They're telling black people, go ahead and get them guns and rifles, arm yourself. These white guys are out here acting stupid, okay? So by now, gun shops in Washington, D.C. had urged the owners not to sell any guns to black people. We always know how to make a way. So black people would go to Baltimore to get guns and ammo. There was a lot of guns and ammo in Baltimore. So they would smuggle the guns and ammo into Washington, D.C. from Baltimore. That's a whole nother state, even though it was right there, problem solved. There was also light-skinned black people who were World War I veterans who infiltrated these white mobs and groups. Okay, so they would pass off as white because they were light, and they would come back to the black community with the intel, letting people know that, listen, boom, 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 this is what they said they're going to do here, this, and that next. So remember, they were just letting anybody come with these mobs. As long as you was white and willing to hurt black people, come on through. You know what I'm saying? So rumors hit the streets that Howard University ROTC officers were handing out guns and ammo. So barricades were set up around Howard and the U Street area with rooftops patrolled by black men with rifles, including World War I veterans, okay? So these black folks, they're on the rooftops, sharpshooters and all that other stuff, yeah. Clapping white people from the roof, hitting them, you know what I mean? Blowing beaks off. Black veterans use their skills from the war, okay? They're fighting these white supremacists in their city. Now, the main battlegrounds were 14th and Florida and 11th and U and 7th and T Streets, okay? I got to repeat that again for the Washington, D.C. people. 14th and Florida, 11th and U, 7th and T, okay? Black people were pummeling white soldiers with bricks off of rooftops and all kinds of boulders and things like that. They're going at it, okay? There were even black women who got involved. A young sister, 17 years of age, by the name of Carrie Johnson, she got very active. Now, Carrie Johnson, she lived with her dad, and the white folks had told the police that black people were shooting from the rooftop at their house, the house that she lived in with her dad. So the police came to their house, came in deep to raid them, came in to get her and her father or whatever, do what they wanted to do. But Carrie Johnson, she was hiding under the bed. And yes, people, this is a real photo of her right here. She's under the bed hiding. she shot back. Okay, when she shot back, she killed the white detective by the name of Harry Wilson, hit him in the chest. So Carrie Johnson and her father, they were both shot as well, but they both survived. And due to this, Carrie Johnson became a big time hero in the black press, okay? There was even a poem that was published about her, about what she did. And Carrie Johnson, only 17, she shot this white guy, whatever. She was a big deal. Her people applauded her for this. She was also charged with first-degree murder, and in 1921, she was convicted of manslaughter, but a separate judge overturned the verdict after accepting the fact that she feared for her life and acted in self-defense. So within 2 years, Carrie Johnson was a free woman. So people, we out here fighting and winning, man. Lost a few, but we're pushing more of them, okay? And they have white mobs of soldiers, the police, everybody behind them, and they're losing, calling all white men to come out. Super deep. But they're getting hit up by snipers on rooftops. Carrie Johnson already blew one of them away in her house. You know, black folks are pummeling in these knuckle-dragging beasts with bricks from rooftops, giving them hell. They taking an L, you know what I mean? So what had to happen eventually was, since they were taking a loss, President Wilson gave authorization to mobilize 2,000 soldiers into Washington, D.C. to block the streets. They had tanks with machine guns coming from Fort Meade, which is 25 miles away in Maryland, to end all this violence. In addition to this military presence, it was a very strong rainstorm. I mean, the rain was hardcore rain, and it lasted a while, and that kept people inside. And that kind of contributed to the end of the D.C. race war as well, okay? A war that started out due to the white community's jealousy of black people, white women lying as usual, the media creating all kinds of false stories to make more money that they knew would trigger these miserable, jealous Mayo monsters in their community. Still to this day, as usual. So people, after this riot, they created new gun control laws in Washington, D.C. And many people believe that that was done to keep the firearms out of black people's hands because they know what could happen if that goes down, you know what I mean? So till this day, there is no marker in Washington, D.C. to mark when black people fought a war against the white community and won, okay? Nothing commemorates this in Washington, D.C. Black people standing up for themselves with no help from the government, police, nobody actually fighting against them, because the white community always has the government and the police behind them, you know what I mean? And the reason why they don't want people to know is because they don't want the youth to know that there are actually black people who fought back in their city and won. They don't want us to know that those white folks were the aggressors. They had the numbers. They had to call soldiers and all kinds of white men, and they still lost. They don't want to make a marker for that. But people, you notice, you can go to any state and city throughout the country in America, and you'll find all kinds of markers and plaques commemorating when a black person got lynched or beat the brakes off of them till they was dead on the streets, and all kinds of different events where black people were wiped out by these white terrorists. You notice they'll show that. They'll have markers for that everywhere. That's because they want you to know about that, okay? It does something to the mind. It scares black people. You know what I'm saying? They don't want people to know about the DC race riots. Send this to all of those "we are not our ancestors" people. How about them, okay? That group of ignorant folks, okay, at this point in their life. Whoever says that at that point in their life, they're a very ignorant person. We are not our ancestors. Y'all know them people I'm talking about? They say it as if it's a tough flex, like they're doing something, but it just shows how super brainwashed by whitey they are. You know what I mean? But anyway, people, get in the comments. Let us know what you know about this right here. Link in the description to the masterpiece. The N-word is no secret in the service. Also, link to the email list. Go holler at that. Easy.